You fired me over a necklace you lost yourself. Liana's voice was calm, but her words cut like glass. Across the boardroom, Selena froze, her perfect facade cracking. She had come to beg for funding, never imagining the chairman's wife was the very maid she once destroyed. What happened next stunned everyone in the room. But to understand this moment, we need to go back to the night a loyal maid's life was torn apart by a single lie. Before we continue, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe for more stories like this. Now let's dive in. The Whitmore mansion glittered that night. Crystal chandeliers dripped with light, violins played in the corner, and the guests of London's upper society laughed, drank, and danced across the marble floor. Liana Moore, dressed in her neat black maid's uniform with a white apron, moved silently through the crowd. She balanced a tray of champagne glasses, her steps light as air, her eyes always lowered in respect. Though she was only 22, Liana carried herself with quiet grace. She had worked for the Whitmores since she was 16, loyal and diligent. For her, serving this household wasn't just a job, it was a way to repay the kindness of Mr. Whitmore, who had once helped her widowed mother with rent when no one else would. "Another glass, she asked politely, stopping beside a group of women in sparkling gowns. Selena Hart, Adrian Blackwood's fiancée, lifted her glass lazily. Selena was stunning, with golden hair twisted into an elegant bun, diamonds shining at her neck and wrists. But behind the beauty was sharpness, a cruelty that often hid in her smile. She looked Liana up and down as though she were a stain on her silk dress. "No. Just take this away." She dropped the half-full glass onto Liana's tray without even a thank you. Liana nodded, unbothered. She had grown used to Selena's dismissive attitude. From across the room, Adrian Blackwood approached, tall, handsome, with the air of a man who had never been told no. He slipped an arm around Selena's waist. "Enjoying yourself?" he asked. "Of course," Selena replied, but her sharp eyes flicked around the room, always aware of who was watching. Not far away, Mrs. Emily Whitmore, the hostess, laughed brightly with her friends. Around her neck glistened her prized possession, a diamond necklace, a piece so famous it had been written about in magazines. The light caught on each stone, scattering like tiny stars. Hours passed. The party wound down. The orchestra packed away their instruments, and the last guests began to leave. Liana and the other maids cleared glasses and folded away linens. Suddenly, a scream cut through the quiet. "Where is it?" Emily Whitmore's voice trembled with panic. "My necklace. It's gone." The room froze. "What do you mean gone?" Mr. Whitmore asked, rushing to her side. "It was right here." Emily clutched her neck, her hand shaking. "I took it off for a moment, just to rest it. I put it on the vanity in the guest room. And now, it's not there." Gasps spread among the staff. Selena stepped forward, her voice dripping with false concern. "Oh dear. But who could have taken it?" Her gaze slid, sharp as a knife, to where Liana stood with the tray. Liana blinked, confused. "Madam, I don't know anything about it." Selena's lips curved into a cold smile. "Don't you? You were in and out of that room, weren't you? Serving, cleaning, moving about. I saw you near the stairs." Liana's face flushed. "Yes, but only to deliver drinks. I never touched." "How convenient." Selena's voice grew louder, enough for the whole room to hear. "A priceless necklace disappears, and the only person who could have been close enough to take it is, well, the maid." A murmur rippled through the guests. "No!" Liana cried, her voice trembling but strong. "I would never steal. Mrs. Whitmore, you know me. I've served this house for 6 years faithfully." Emily's brow furrowed. She looked torn, but her fear of losing such a treasure outweighed her trust. "But it's gone, Liana. And you were nearby." Adrian crossed his arms, silent, his eyes unreadable. "Search her," Selena said suddenly, her tone like ice. Gasps echoed again. Liana's chest tightened. Her heart pounded. You have no right, she whispered. But Emily, frantic and pale, nodded. Just to be sure. And so, in front of everyone, Liana was searched. Her apron pockets were turned inside out. Her bag, an old cloth one she kept in the kitchen, was opened, revealing only her worn Bible and a scarf her mother had sewn. No necklace. Still, Selina wasn't satisfied. She stepped closer, her eyes gleaming with cruelty. Thieves can be clever. Maybe she hid it somewhere else. Perhaps she already sold it. People like her, they don't have much to lose. Liana felt heat rise in her face. People like me. Selina smirked. Servants. The desperate. You think we don't notice how you watch everything with those big eyes of yours? Always listening, always waiting. Don't tell me you've never thought about what it would feel like to wear diamonds. Tears burned at Liana's eyes, but she stood tall. I may be poor, Miss Hart, but I am not a thief. Selina's voice sharpened. Then why don't you prove it? Where's the necklace? Liana's silence was all Selina needed. She turned to the Whitmores. You see? She can't explain. I'm sorry, but you can't keep someone like that in this house. What if she takes something else next time? Mr. Whitmore hesitated, but Emily's trembling hand clutched his. I can't risk it. The decision fell like a stone. Liana Moore, Mr. Whitmore said heavily, you are dismissed. Leave this house at once. Liana gasped as though struck. Sir, please. But Emily turned her face away. Selina's lips curved in triumph. With nothing left to say, Liana removed her apron, folded it neatly, and set it on the table. She bowed her head, though her tears fell freely. I swear before God, I am innocent. No one answered. As she walked out, the grand doors closing behind her, she heard Selina's laughter ring softly through the hall. The night was cold. Liana walked down the long road away from the Whitmore mansion, the gravel crunching beneath her worn shoes. She had no money, no belongings, only her small bag with a scarf and Bible. Her chest ached. She had given 6 years of her life to that household. She had scrubbed floors until her hands cracked, stayed up late mending sheets, woken early to polish silver. And in one cruel moment, it had all been ripped away. The word followed her like a ghost. Thief. By morning, whispers had already spread through the neighborhood. At the bakery, 2 women stood in line, their voices hushed but sharp. Did you hear about the Whitmore's maid? They say she stole Mrs. Whitmore's diamonds. Shameful. And she always seemed so quiet, too. You never know. Liana walked past, her head down, pretending not to hear, though every word pierced her like a blade. At the market, the butcher shook his head when she tried to buy bread. Sorry, Miss Moore. Best not to serve your kind. Bad for business. Children pointed at her. Thief! Thief! Liana hurried away, her cheeks burning. That evening, she returned to her mother's small cottage at the edge of town. Her mother, frail and coughing, looked up with worried eyes. Liana, why are you home so early? The tears finally broke free. Liana sank to her knees beside her mother's chair. They accused me, Mama, of stealing Mrs. Whitmore's necklace. They fired me. Her mother gasped. No, but you would never. I didn't. I swear I didn't. But they wouldn't listen. They searched me, shamed me, called me a thief. Her mother's eyes filled with sorrow. She reached for Liana's hands. Let them say what they will. The truth is still the truth. You are my daughter, and I know your heart. Liana pressed her forehead to her mother's lap, sobbing quietly. What do I do now? Who will hire me? No one trusts a maid accused of stealing. Her mother stroked her hair gently. Then maybe this is not the end. Maybe it is the beginning of something else. You are stronger than you know. Liana wanted to believe her, but all she felt was broken. The weeks that followed were cruel. She knocked on doors, offering her service, but was turned away again and again. Not after what we heard, people whispered. We can't take that risk. Hunger gnawed at her belly. At night she lay awake listening to her mother's coughs, praying for answers. Finally, an elderly widow named Mrs. Green took pity on her. You may sweep my floors, child. It isn't much, but I believe you. I know a liar when I see one. It was the smallest of jobs, but it was something. Liana worked for pennies, cleaning small houses, scrubbing kitchens, washing sheets. Her hands grew red and raw, but she did not complain. One evening, after finishing her work, she sat before the cracked mirror in her tiny room. Her face looked pale, her eyes weary. She whispered to her reflection, "They can take my job. They can call me names. But they cannot take who I am." Her voice trembled at first, then grew steadier. "I am not a thief. I will prove it, not to them, but to myself. I will rise again." For the first time since that dreadful night, a spark flickered inside her. It was small, but it was hope. The weeks turned into months. Every morning, Liana rose before dawn, tied her hair back, and set out with her old broom and bucket. She worked from house to house, polishing floors, scrubbing windows, washing laundry. At first, the humiliation still weighed heavy. Some clients whispered behind her back, "That's the Whitmore's maid, isn't it? The one who stole the necklace. Careful, don't leave your purse lying around." But Liana did not argue. She lowered her head and kept working, her silence her shield. She knew words could not change their minds. Only time could. One evening, she came home with aching arms and sat beside her mother. The cottage was dim, lit only by a single candle. Her mother coughed, then smiled faintly. "You are working too hard, Liana." "I must, Mama. We need food and medicine for your cough." Her mother shook her head gently. "Child, you can do more than sweep floors forever. You have a mind. You have hands that can build something new." Liana sighed. "Who would believe in me? To them, I will always be the thief." "Then let them believe it. You do not need their belief. You need your own." Her mother's words lingered. That night, Liana opened her worn Bible, not for prayer this time, but to press notes between its pages. The pennies she earned, the small coins she saved, every bit went in. She whispered to herself, "One day, I will build something greater." The turning point came when she heard of a women's foundation that held weekly gatherings at the town hall. Curious, she attended. The hall was filled with women, widows, single mothers, young girls abandoned by families. They shared stories of hardship, hunger, abuse, poverty. Yet there was also laughter, encouragement, and a spark of defiance. At the front, a strong, kind woman named Mrs. Abigail Turner led the group. "We are not victims," she said firmly. "We are survivors. And survivors can become leaders." Her words stirred something deep in Liana. For the first time, she did not feel alone. After the meeting, Mrs. Turner approached her. "I've seen you listening closely. What is your story, child?" Liana hesitated, then told her everything: the necklace, the false accusation, the shame. Mrs. Turner's eyes narrowed. "And yet here you stand. Do you see, my dear? They try to bury you, but you are already pushing through the soil. You need direction, not permission." She placed a pamphlet in Liana's hands. "We offer night classes, basic literacy, bookkeeping, small business training. Come." The classes were not easy. Liana would spend her days cleaning, then hurry to the hall with sore feet, her hands smelling of soap. But she never missed a session. She learned to read fluently, to write with care, to calculate accounts. She discovered the power of planning, of saving, of investing in people. She began to dream of something beyond surviving, something that could lift others too. One evening, after a long class, she sat with Mrs. Turner and whispered her vision. What if there was a place where women like us could work together? Not just cleaning houses, but weaving, sewing, making things with pride. Work that gives dignity, not shame. A place that helps women who have been cast aside to stand again. Mrs. Turner's eyes lit up. That is no small dream, Liana Moore. But it is possible. Dreams like that begin with one brave step. The first step was small indeed. Liana gathered 3 other women from the foundation. They pooled their savings, bought second-hand sewing machines, and rented a tiny corner room above an old bakery. They called it Grace Woven. At first, they stitched tablecloths and simple dresses. The stitches were uneven, the fabric plain. But slowly, their skills improved. Customers began to return, not just for the quality, but for the story, work created by women who had once been broken but now stood strong. The day they received their first large order, from a church that needed dozens of embroidered cloths, Liana wept with joy. "This is just the beginning," she told her small team. "One day, we will not only feed our families, we will give hope to others like us." The women nodded, their eyes shining. And so, Grace Woven grew. 2 years later, Liana stood before the mirror in the small office of Grace Woven. She barely recognized herself. Her plain maid's uniform had long been replaced by a modest but elegant dress of her own design, soft gray with careful stitching. Her hair, once tied back in haste, now fell in neat curls around her shoulders. Her eyes still carried the memory of pain, but they also burned with quiet confidence. Grace Woven had expanded into 3 rented rooms, with over 20 women working together. The sound of sewing machines filled the halls each day, a rhythm of survival turned into success. But money was tight. Orders were increasing, yet without investment, they could not keep up. Liana knew they needed support. When she received an invitation to a charity gala, a gathering of philanthropists and business leaders, she hesitated. It would be held at a hotel grander than anything she had ever entered. She feared she would be out of place. But Mrs. Turner urged her on. "You belong there as much as anyone. Let them see you. Let them hear your story." The gala was dazzling. Women in satin gowns, men in tailored suits, chandeliers glowing like golden suns. Liana walked in nervously, clutching her modest handbag, her invitation in hand. She felt the old whispers in her mind. "You are only a maid. You do not belong here." But then she remembered her mother's words. "You need your own belief." So she lifted her chin and walked with quiet dignity. At one table, a man was speaking with a small group, his voice calm yet commanding. He was tall, with dark hair sprinkled with silver at the temples, and eyes that seemed to notice everything. When his gaze fell on Liana, she felt a strange warmth, as though he truly saw her, not just her dress or her position. He excused himself from the group and approached. "Good evening. I don't believe we've met. I'm Jonathan Pierce." Liana froze slightly. The name was familiar. Jonathan Pierce, the chairman of Aurora Holdings, one of the most powerful investment firms in the country. She swallowed her nerves. "I'm Liana Moore." "A pleasure, Miss Moore." He smiled warmly. "Are you here with one of the charities?" "Yes. I run a small social enterprise called Grace Woven. We employ women who have faced hardship and give them training and work. It's still very small, but," she trailed off, embarrassed. Instead of dismissing her, Jonathan's interest deepened. "Tell me more. How did it begin?" Liana hesitated, then spoke honestly. She told him about her false dismissal, her struggles, her decision to rise again. She described the sewing machines, the women working, the hope growing in that small rented space. As she spoke, Jonathan's expression softened. He listened not with pity, but with admiration. When she finished, she looked down, her cheeks warm. "I'm sorry. I spoke too much." "Not at all," Jonathan said gently. "I've attended hundreds of galas, and rarely do I hear something so genuine. What you've built is extraordinary, Miss Moore." Throughout the evening, they spoke again and again. At one point, Jonathan asked, Do you have enough support? Funding? Resources? Liana shook her head. Not yet. We stretch every coin. I fear if we cannot grow soon, we may lose our chance. Jonathan's eyes glimmered with thought. Perhaps that can change. Aurora Holdings does not only invest in profits. We invest in futures. People like you, leaders who turn pain into power, are worth far more than gold. Liana's breath caught. Was this real? Before they parted, Jonathan handed her his card. Come see me. Let's talk about Grace Woven properly. Her fingers trembled as she held the card. The chairman of Aurora Holdings wanted to hear her vision. That night, as she returned to her small room above the bakery, she clutched the card close. For years, the world had called her a thief, had laughed at her pain. But now, someone powerful had looked at her and seen not shame, but strength. She whispered to herself, as she had many times before, but now with new fire. They tried to bury me. They did not know I was a seed. And for the first time, she truly believed it. The weeks after the gala were a blur. Liana still remembered the card Jonathan Pierce had pressed into her hand. At first, she hesitated to contact him. What if he had only been polite? What if she walked into Aurora Holdings and was laughed out of the building? But Mrs. Turner pushed her forward. He saw something in you, Liana. Don't doubt it. Go. And so, one bright morning, Liana walked through the tall glass doors of Aurora Holdings. Her plain dress and simple shoes stood out among the sleek suits and shining heels, but she held her head high. At the reception, the secretary smiled. Mr. Pierce is expecting you. The words felt unreal. Expecting her? Jonathan greeted her warmly in his office, a space lined with shelves of books, not just financial records but history, philosophy, stories of resilience. Miss Moore, he said, rising from behind his desk. Thank you for coming. Please, sit. They spoke for over an hour. Liana explained Grace Woven's vision, how women survivors were not looking for pity but for opportunity. She told stories of workers who had once begged on the streets, now stitching with pride. Jonathan listened intently, asking thoughtful questions. Finally, he leaned back, his expression firm. You have built something rare. I want Aurora to support Grace Woven, not just with funding, but with networks, training, and markets. Your work deserves scale. Liana blinked, her voice caught. You believe in it. I believe in you, Jonathan said simply. Tears burned at her eyes, but she swallowed them, nodding. That moment changed everything. Aurora's investment allowed Grace Woven to expand. They moved into a larger building, a once-abandoned textile factory, now alive with light and movement. Dozens of women filled the halls, sewing machines humming, laughter echoing between brick walls. The air smelled of fabric and fresh hope. Liana walked through the rows of workers, pausing to speak with each. How is your son, Maria? She asked one woman. Does he like school now? He does, thanks to the uniform I could buy him, Maria replied, smiling proudly. To another, Ruth, your embroidery is stunning today. That detail, look at the precision. Ruth blushed, unused to praise. For Liana, this was not just business. It was family. The media soon caught notice. A local newspaper wrote, From maid to founder, how one woman is weaving dignity back into lives. Soon, bigger outlets followed. Grace Woven appeared in magazines, on radio interviews. The more people heard, the more orders flooded in, hotels, churches, even fashion boutiques wanting to feature the designs. At one press event, a reporter asked, Miss Moore, what gave you the strength to start all this after what you went through? Liana paused, then said softly, They tried to strip me of dignity. But dignity is not something others can give or take, it's something you choose to carry. I chose to rise. The room fell silent before bursting into applause. Through it all, Jonathan was there. Not as a savior, but as a partner. One evening, after a long meeting with suppliers, they walked together along the Thames. The city lights shimmered on the water. "You've built something remarkable, Liana," Jonathan said quietly. She smiled faintly. "Not alone. Without Aurora, without you, we'd still be stitching in that little room above the bakery." He shook his head. "You misunderstand. Aurora gave resources. But you gave vision. You gave heart. That cannot be bought." She looked at him then, really looked. His eyes were steady, kind, and for the first time in years, she felt warmth that was not only gratitude, it was something deeper. "Jonathan," she whispered, "I used to think my life ended the night I was accused. But perhaps it only began." His hand brushed hers gently. "Perhaps so." And under the quiet night sky, their story of partnership began to turn into love. Months later, Grace Woven celebrated its 5th anniversary with a grand event. Rows of women stood proudly, wearing dresses of their own making, their children clapping in the audience. Liana gave a speech. "5 years ago, I had nothing. No job, no name, no respect. Only shame. But I learned that the world may try to bury us, yet we are seeds. Tonight, you see the garden that has grown." The crowd roared with cheers and tears. Jonathan was among them, his eyes shining not only with pride but with affection. And soon after, he proposed, not in grandeur, but in quiet sincerity. "Will you walk with me in both life and work, Liana? Will you be my partner in all things?" Her answer was simple, her voice steady, "Yes." Their wedding was beautiful, not for its wealth but for its heart. Women from Grace Woven stitched her gown, every thread a symbol of resilience. Jonathan, the powerful chairman, stood humbled beside the woman who had once been cast out as a thief. Together, they built not only a marriage, but a movement. While Liana's star rose, Selena Hart's world crumbled. At first, she lived as though nothing had changed. Parties, dresses, the glamorous life of Adrian Blackwood's fiancé. But beneath the glitter, cracks widened. Adrian's investments faltered. He had gambled too much on risky ventures, and debts mounted. Soon, creditors came knocking. "Just a rough patch," Adrian insisted one night, pacing their lavish flat. "I'll find new investors." Selena folded her arms, her voice sharp. "You said that last month. Where is the money, Adrian? Where are the returns?" He snapped back. "Do you think it's easy? Do you think fortunes grow on trees?" Selena's anger turned to fear as bills piled higher. Their parties grew fewer. Their friends stopped calling. The glittering invitations no longer came. When the bank finally repossessed Adrian's car, Selena wept, not for the car itself, but for the humiliation of neighbors whispering, "The Blackwoods are losing everything." The final blow came when Adrian, unable to bear the shame, fled abroad, leaving Selena behind with debts she could not pay. Alone in their half-empty apartment, Selena stared at her reflection in the cracked mirror. Her once flawless skin was pale, her hair unkempt. "How did it come to this?" she whispered. She thought of Liana, the maid she had once sneered at. The memory stung, not with guilt, but with bitter irony. "Even that girl probably has more dignity now than I do." Desperation sparked an idea. If she could no longer rely on Adrian, she would create her own success. She had beauty, she had charm, she had connections. Surely that was enough. She launched a startup called Rise Her, a glossy women's empowerment platform. She spoke loudly about lifting women and building futures, but beneath the polished words was emptiness. She had no real plan, no heart for the mission. Still, she was determined to make it shine. She borrowed money to host events, hired designers to make brochures, practiced speeches in front of the mirror. One night, she told herself fiercely, "This will be my return. I will not be forgotten." But funding was scarce. Investors were cautious, skeptical. "Your proposal sounds inspiring," they would say politely, "but what is your actual model? How will it sustain?" Selena would smile, charm them, but leave empty-handed. Until she heard about Aurora Holdings' annual forum, a gathering where entrepreneurs pitched their ventures before powerful investors. It was her chance. If I can just get in the door, she whispered, they'll see I still belong in the circle of the powerful. She spent days rehearsing her pitch, practicing her smile, perfecting her slides. She wore her last elegant dress, though its seams were fraying, and borrowed jewelry to complete the illusion. On the morning of the forum, she stood before the mirror, forcing her reflection to look confident. This is it, Selena. This is how you rise again. She had no idea that waiting behind those doors, seated at the boardroom table, was the woman she had once destroyed. The Aurora Grand Forum was unlike anything Selena Hart had ever seen. It was held in a towering glass building that caught the morning sun like a jewel, its lobby filled with men and women in sharp suits, speaking in clipped, confident tones. There were cameras, journalists, and banners that read, Aurora Holdings, investing in the future. Selena forced herself to walk tall, her heels clicking against the marble floor. Her navy dress still looked elegant at a glance, though she knew its fabric was worn thin. She had polished her smile until it gleamed as brightly as her diamond earrings, borrowed from a friend who still tolerated her. I belong here, she told herself. I will not let them see my desperation. A receptionist handed her a badge, Selena Hart, founder, Rise Her. She pinned it to her chest like armor. The main conference room was vast, with a polished oak table stretching across its center. Rows of chairs lined the sides for observers. At the head sat the Aurora board, men and women of influence, each commanding respect with their mere presence. Selena scanned their faces nervously. Investors, journalists, advisors, and at the far end, the chairman himself, Jonathan Pierce. His reputation preceded him, brilliant, fair, and impossible to fool. She steadied her breathing. She would impress him. When the moderator called, next pitch, Selena Hart, Rise Her, her stomach twisted, but she rose gracefully and walked to the podium. She flicked on her slides. Bright graphics lit the screen behind her. Smiling women, motivational quotes, buzzwords like empowerment, success, future. Ladies and gentlemen, she began smoothly, Rise Her is not just a startup. It is a movement. A platform for women everywhere to rise from the ashes, to reclaim their power, to step into a brighter tomorrow. Her voice carried well. Heads nodded politely. On the surface, her performance was flawless. But inside, her hands trembled on the podium. Please, let this work. Let someone believe me. As she continued, her gaze traveled down the table, and then froze. There, seated among the board, was a woman she recognized instantly. Her dress was simple but elegant, her hair in soft waves, her posture poised with quiet authority. It was Liana Moore. Selena's heart slammed against her ribs. For a moment, her words faltered. She quickly recovered, plastering on her smile. But panic rippled through her veins. What is she doing here? How could she be here? Liana sat calmly, listening, her hands folded on the table. But her eyes, those steady, unflinching eyes, were fixed on Selena. The same eyes that once pleaded for mercy in the Whitmore mansion. The same eyes that Selena had dismissed with a smirk. Selena's throat tightened, but she forced herself to finish. And with your investment, Rise Her will expand nationally, giving women the tools they need to succeed. Applause rose politely as she closed her presentation. She tried to smile, though her knees felt weak. All right, the moderator said. We will now take questions from the board. A man asked about her financial model. Selena answered vaguely, circling back to words like empowerment and vision. Another asked about her team. She spoke of partners and networks, but her answers grew thinner under scrutiny. Then, at last, a soft but steady voice cut through the air. Miss Hart. Selena stiffened. It was Liana. Liana's voice was calm, but the weight in it silenced the room. Your presentation was polished, she said, her eyes never leaving Selena's. But forgive me if I ask, what drives Rise Her? What is your true purpose beyond the slides and slogans? Selena swallowed. My purpose is, well, to help women, of course. To give them opportunities, to Opportunities, Liana interrupted gently, that you once took away from others. The words hung in the air like glass shattering. Murmurs rippled across the room. Selena's face drained of color. What do you mean? She stammered. Liana leaned forward slightly, her tone steady. Years ago, you stood in a grand house and accused me of stealing a necklace. You had no proof, yet you ruined my name. I lost my job, my reputation, everything I had. Gasps rose from the audience. Selena's mouth opened, but no words came. Liana's gaze never wavered. That night, you fired me with a smirk. Do you remember your words? People like her cannot be trusted. Selena's knees nearly buckled. She gripped the podium. It was a misunderstanding. No, Liana's voice cut clean, though it remained calm. It was cruelty. You saw a maid and thought her life had no value. But I took the ashes you left me in, and I built something greater. Grace woven is not a slogan, it is living proof of resilience. And now, I sit here not as a servant, but as a leader. Meanwhile, you come before this board with empty promises. The room was electric, every face turned toward them. Jonathan Pierce spoke then, his voice measured. Miss Hart, is what Liana says true? Selena's lips trembled. I don't remember the details. It was years ago. Perhaps mistakes were made. Mistakes? Liana echoed softly. You humiliated me in front of a room full of people. You branded me a thief when I was innocent. That was not a mistake, Miss Hart. That was a choice. Selena's facade cracked. Her voice rose, desperate. I was young. I didn't know. It was a different time. But the board members were shaking their heads, whispering to one another. One woman spoke up. If this is how you treat others when in power, how can we trust you to empower anyone? Another added, your proposal is shallow, and your past conduct shows a lack of integrity. Selena's chest heaved. Please, I've changed. I only need one chance. Liana's expression softened, though her words remained firm. You had your chance, Selena. You had it the night I begged you to believe me. And you chose cruelty. The board does not need slogans. It needs truth. It needs integrity. And I will not let you stand here and use the language of empowerment for your own survival. Silence. Then Jonathan's voice, final and resolute. The board rejects rise her. We cannot fund a venture built on falsehood. Selena stood frozen. For a moment, she thought she would faint. Around her, the polite applause that had once greeted her pitch was replaced by murmurs of disapproval. Her eyes darted to the doors. She wanted to run, but her feet refused to move. Liana, however, remained composed. She did not smirk, did not gloat. She simply looked at Selena with calm eyes, and in that gaze was the most painful truth of all, indifference. Selena realized then, she no longer mattered. When the session ended, Selena stumbled out of the conference room, her heels clicking unevenly on the polished floor. In the quiet corridor, away from the crowd, she pressed her hands to her face and let out a broken sob. She remembered the laughter she had once shared at glittering parties, the power she had once wielded with a single whisper. All gone. And she remembered Liana, the maid she had destroyed, now walking past her with dignity, with strength, with love at her side. Selena whispered to herself, voice cracked and trembling, I destroyed myself the day I destroyed her. Inside the boardroom, Liana gathered her notes, her hands steady. She felt Jonathan's gaze on her, warm with pride. You handled that with grace, he murmured as they left together. She shook her head softly. Grace is all that kept me alive in those years. I will never waste it on cruelty. As the two of them stepped into the sunlight outside the glass tower, Liana breathed deeply. For the first time in a long time, she felt the full weight of justice. Not loud, not vengeful, but steady, complete. The world had turned, and this time, she stood tall. The echo of rejection followed Selena long after she left the Aurora Forum. She stumbled through the lobby, her borrowed earrings heavy on her ears, her breath ragged. People turned to look, some with pity, some with scorn. Cameras flashed as journalists whispered, "Wasn't that the woman who failed her pitch? She was torn apart in there. Her past. Did you hear what came out? Disgraceful." Selena shoved through the doors into the cold London air. The wind whipped her hair into her face, stinging her eyes, but she could not tell if the wetness on her cheeks came from the weather or her tears. Her taxi driver barely glanced at her as she climbed inside. She slumped against the seat, clutching her handbag as if it held the last pieces of her dignity. As the car pulled away, her mind replayed Liana's words over and over. "You had your chance the night I begged you to believe me. And you chose cruelty." Each word was a blade. At home, the emptiness of her flat suffocated her. The rooms once filled with parties and laughter now echoed with silence. The cupboards were nearly bare. Bills littered the dining table, each one stamped with red letters, overdue. Selena poured herself a glass of wine, but her hands shook so much the liquid sloshed over the rim. She dropped the glass, and it shattered across the floor. She sank to her knees among the shards, pressing her palms against her face. "I had everything," she whispered, "and I let it all slip away." Her mind spiraled back to that night in the Whitmore mansion, the necklace, the accusation, the smug triumph she had felt as Liana was dragged out. She had thought herself untouchable then, a queen among servants. Now, she was the one in tatters. The next morning, she tried to salvage her pride. She called an old acquaintance, a woman she had once considered beneath her. "Clara," she said sweetly, forcing brightness into her tone. "It's been too long. I wondered if you'd like to." Clara cut her off. "Selena, I know what happened yesterday. Everyone does. Don't call me again." The line went dead. Selena stared at her phone, the dial tone buzzing like a cruel laugh. One by one, she tried others, former friends, old party companions, business contacts. One by one, they dismissed her, their voices cold. No one wanted to be associated with a failure, with a woman whose past sins had been dragged into the light. By the end of the day, she sat alone in her kitchen, her phone silent, her world crumbling. For the first time, she whispered the truth aloud, "I have nothing." Meanwhile, in another part of the city, Liana's life carried a different rhythm. She returned home after the forum, greeted by Jonathan's warm embrace. Together they sat at their table, not in a palace or mansion, but in a home filled with laughter and light. "How do you feel?" Jonathan asked softly, brushing her hand. Liana thought for a long moment. "Relieved. Not because she was rejected, but because I finally spoke my truth. For years, I carried that wound in silence. Today, I let it go." Jonathan's eyes shone with pride. "You've turned pain into power, Liana. Few could do what you've done." She smiled faintly. "Pain built me, but dignity saved me." In the days that followed, whispers spread quickly through the business world. Selena Hart's reputation was shattered. No investor would touch her. No magazine wanted her story. She became a cautionary tale whispered at dinner parties. "Be careful how you treat people, you never know who they'll become." Meanwhile, Grace Woven's reputation soared even higher. Journalists celebrated not just its products but its spirit. Women lined up, not for charity, but for the chance to be part of something meaningful. And at the center of it all, Liana remained steady, gracious in victory, humble in success. Justice had come, not with vengeance, but with truth revealed. The morning sun streamed through the tall windows of the Grace Woven headquarters, casting golden light across the rows of sewing tables. Women worked with steady hands, laughter spilling between them. At the far end of the room, a banner hung proudly. "Grace Woven, threads of dignity, woven with hope." Liana walked the floor, stopping to admire a dress embroidered with delicate roses. She smiled at Ruth, the woman stitching. "Beautiful work," Liana said warmly. Ruth beamed. "Before this place, I thought I was useless. Now I feel like I matter." "You always mattered," Liana replied softly. "This place just reminds you." Later that day, she sat in the boardroom of Aurora Holdings, now not as a guest but as a respected member. Across from her sat Jonathan, her husband, her partner. The board discussed new projects, new investments. But when Grace Woven's name came up, every face turned toward Liana with admiration. Her journey was no longer hidden. Everyone knew the story, the maid once accused of theft, now a leader shaping lives. As the meeting ended, Jonathan squeezed her hand. "Do you realize what you've built? You've changed more than just lives. You've changed legacies." Liana smiled, her eyes shining. "This isn't just mine, Jonathan. It belongs to every woman who refused to be broken." That evening, they attended a gala, not as servant and master, not as guest and host, but as equals. When Liana entered the room, people turned to look, not with whispers of suspicion, but with respect. She was no longer the accused maid. She was the voice of resilience, the symbol of integrity. A reporter approached her with a microphone. "Mrs. Pierce, what lesson would you want the world to take from your story?" Liana paused, her gaze calm. "That cruelty may destroy reputations, but it can never erase dignity. That falsehood may wound, but truth heals. And that when you rise with grace, no one can pull you down." The room erupted in applause. Far away, Selena sat alone in her dim apartment, scrolling through the news on her cracked phone. She saw the headline, "From Maid to Mogul, Liana Moore Pierce's Journey of Triumph." The photo showed Liana radiant in her gown, Jonathan by her side. The crowd behind them cheered. Selena's throat closed. She hurled the phone onto the couch and pressed her hands to her face. She remembered the necklace, the smirk she had worn as she pointed the finger, the way she had watched Liana walk out in shame. And now, she saw clearly, that was the moment her own downfall had begun. Back at the gala, as the evening wound down, Jonathan leaned close to Liana. "You know," he murmured, "if you wanted revenge, you had it today." Liana shook her head, her smile serene. "No. Revenge is small. This is triumph. Not over her, but over who I once was. The girl who cried in the dark, broken by false words. I am no longer her." Jonathan kissed her hand gently. "No. You are so much more." As they left the gala together, Liana paused by a display case in the lobby. Inside was a showcase of Aurora's investments, clean water projects, schools, and among them, a photograph of Grace Woven's women at work. Liana touched the glass lightly, her reflection mingling with the image. "They tried to bury me," she whispered softly, a smile curving her lips. "They didn't know I was a seed." With Jonathan by her side and Grace Woven behind her, she stepped into the night, not just triumphant, but free. And so, dignity triumphed where cruelty once reigned. Selena lost everything she built on lies, while Liana rose from the ashes, her truth lighting the way for others. If this story moved you, don't let it end here. Carry its message forward. Hit like if you believe that truth always outshines deceit. Subscribe for more powerful stories of resilience and redemption. And share this video to remind someone that no matter how deep the pain, rising with grace is always possible. Until next time, remember, when life tries to bury you, it may just be planting a seed.